I can't hear you, Josh.
Okay, it sounds good.
It sounds like a podcast, dude.
Hit, haul, and hang.
What I wanted to start talking about today was kind of where I got the name for the show. It's these three things that I think as a working musician, freelancer especially, needs to have in its capability, dependability, likability. Those are the three things that I think everybody working needs to have. I figured that was an appropriate way to start this conversation. And I feel like so much of the time, like especially as you're learning your craft, learning your instrument, learning how to play your given style, you focus so much on capability. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you guys is because you're so good at the other two as well. Capability is a given, but the other two is the part that I'm more interested in because it's the thing that like a school doesn't cover.
Yeah, I mean, except for likability, because no one really likes Andy.
Right.
I can't hear Josh. Was he just talking?
God damn it, I said a really funny joke, Andy.
Well, why didn't you say it into the mic?
You didn't even hear it. Maybe it's because I'm not a professional? Is that what you're saying?
I hear it now. It's because you were sitting back on the couch with your feet up.
How did you know that?
Oh, my God.
Because I know you, bro. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be on the podcast. Bloopers. Motherfuckers.
I was literally laying down with my feet up.
I know you, bro.
How do you
you're like 3 for 3 there. I could remember before you had like any kind of regular work, and I remember seeing people and they'd be performing. I don't know, I'd be like, that's not a big deal. I can do that. And having no concept of why I couldn't do that at all.
How old were you there when you thought that?
I would say like college age and maybe even slightly older.
Wow. By the time I got into college, I was very aware of my incapabilities and pretty nervous performer. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I think I'm not saying I was a perfect performer. I'm saying that was just what was on my mind.
But sorry.
That's
Are you on the couch again, Josh?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay.
the capability, but you were capable. What you're saying is you would see someone on stage, you would say, "Oh, I could do that," and you could do that.
Maybe
Just playing, playing you could do.
The playing
If you were going to take the piece of music home, there's also another factor that we're leaving out, which is if it's a piece that you're playing with others. Because that's a huge factor too. Because some people, I remember looking at people playing and saying, "Oh, I could easily do that," and then getting in that situation and realizing that the playing is not the issue, that it's the communication between the players. Maybe that's what you're going at.
Yeah, it's the communication. But this is actually something I even wanted to start with, and I forgot when we started rolling. But Andy, you and I were trying to line up that thing for next week. Andy and I play with this little orchestra on the Lower East Side every year.
It's pretty big, actually.
Yeah, like chamber orchestra.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. So it's an interesting thing, and it's during a time of day where there's not a lot of work. There's no Friday matinee, so that's not competing with it. And of course, everybody has things they could be doing, but we all know that the pay is relative to what time of day the work is, right? Stuff that's in the morning for a musician doesn't tend to pay as much as stuff that's during a matinee time, and especially stuff that's in an evening time. Or at least that's the way I've come to understand it, because when I'm deciding on whether or not to take a job that conflicts with possible other work, I look at the money compared to what that time of day normally pays me.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually never looked at it that way.
Well, because you only work at night, Mr. Tuxedo.
Actually, yesterday there was a great gig that I did yesterday morning at 8:30 in the morning that I got. It was about what you get for a Broadway show.
Wow.
But that's also kind of rare.
Okay.
Most of the time you're playing dance classes and it's...
Right, and or doing some kind of teaching, and I'm talking about there's always exceptions, and there's always people who live above this level where they don't have really their lowest accepted kind of income for a gig. I don't want to make this all about money, but their lowest level of income has kind of made it so that they don't get called for the small stuff anyway. But anyway, so Andy and I were trying to sort out whether we were going to do this thing together again. This would be our third year doing it. I've been doing this gig for 9 years now. It's not at a time of day where it conflicts with a lot of other possible work. Andy's a super busy guy, so I know that's not the only concern. But because there were other issues with what instruments are going to be there, and because Andy knows very particularly the conductor of this gig, he said, I'm only going to do it if you're on it, and like speaking to me.
Okay.
Like, and I'm not going to say the other part that you said, Andy. And I thought that was like a really telling thing. It's like, yeah, it's okay money. It's not great, but it's not nothing, and it's like 3 hours of work, so you can kind of get in there, do it, and get out, and like go about your business sort of thing. But Andy was really about saying, okay, the other factors, like I can do this. Do I want to do this? And the want to do it has to do with the hassle of it or the non-hassle, and does he like the people that he's going to be involved with? And I think that was, if I can pat myself on the back, I think that may have been a little bit of a tipping point. And the fact that he doesn't have to bring anything. I think
Yes, you may tap yourself on the back. That was the only reason to do it, is to play together and have some laughs. And I know we're going to complain about schlepping, and that is going to be fun in its own right. And then I know that like we're gonna continue our little music stand trick, where every time she taps, we're gonna go, So I mean,
I don't think Josh knows that one.
He doesn't know that one. It's brilliant. And it was in the whole. We got the whole orchestra doing.
Why don't you explain that, Andy?
Please do.
So what happens is this conductor is like 89 years old, and she, she's like so old school. She's like,
Andy, I'm going to interrupt. She is a very nice person, and sometimes she overcommits herself. I will contextualize this.
God, I hope she never hears this podcast.
She won't.
Well, and she's also like the kind of woman who's like, if you stand up to her, she'll back down
Immediately.
But if you don't stand up to her, she will run right over you. And so she's old school. She conducts the orchestra, and she runs the rehearsal as if she was in a high school. And so like anytime she has to stop, which is like every 5 bars, she'll tap her baton on her music stand like as if it's like middle school.
But unironically, with no hint of a smile, it's not supposed to be cute or funny. And she actually, I looked up close, her baton is like mammoth. It's like a 7A practically.
Wow.
Because I'm sure she's broken batons before in her exuberance.
In her day, yeah. So what I got the orchestra doing at the last gig that we did, Josh, was as soon as she would stop the orchestra, I was playing timpani. I'd take my timpani out and put it on the edge of the timpani and be,
And then across the room, I'd go.
And then like literally horn players, clarinet players, like the entire orchestra, the bass players, everyone started just doing, and it would be this really funny ripple effect throughout the orchestra.
It would ripple throughout the room, and Andy and I, no kidding, I would say, what would you say? At least 5 minutes, we couldn't even look up. It was.
We were.
I have never seen
laughing.
Andy laugh so hard ever. He was red faced because it was the circumstance where you can't laugh.
Right.
We're playing like very serious, like Aaron Copland serious music. We're playing the Mio Creation du Monde. Some real serious rep and some good players. But this was like the 9th rehearsal that this group is. And when's the last time you played with a group that had 9 rehearsals?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I guess college.
Yeah, basically. And so we kind of regressed. I feel like, Andy, that might explain it, buddy. We regressed to college right there.
Yeah, well, I was only in the last like 1 or 2 rehearsals. I didn't do the 9, but yeah.
No, but a lot of the people had been there. So that kind of set the scene for everybody to be okay with around.
But the kicker of it is, Josh, she didn't know we were doing it. She couldn't hear it. So it was just this inside joke that the entire orchestra, without speaking a word, was in on. It was so brilliant.
Even the people in the front row, like, the principal violin, like they wouldn't necessarily do it, but you could see this little smirk involuntarily popping up on people's faces in the room.
It was beautiful.
So that's the gig that I called Andy for, and that's what he wants to bring back on Friday. Maybe we'll have some live audio. Andy, I don't know if I told you, I recorded us doing that when we had that gig in February.
I never heard it.
Okay, we'll see if we can.
You recorded that moment?
Some of it.
The tapping?
Yeah.
Oh, we gotta play that for our listeners.
Oh yeah, let's see if you can get away with.
It also became. I remember one comment I made to like a trombone player who had been in the trenches with me under this conductor several times. It was something along the lines of, "I wonder if this is what the early American colonists felt like right before the Revolutionary War," because it was this moment where like, okay, we have a leadership here, and we'll do what you want if it's reasonable. But this is not reasonable.
Yeah, right.
And I never heard that. That's hilarious.
Well, I didn't say it too many times because I had so many other wise-ass things that were going through my head during that time.
The whole point, kiddies and adults alike who are listening to this, is that you got to pick and choose which gigs you want to take based on several factors. One of them is money, of course, blah, blah, blah. One of them is, is it a really high standing gig? But another one is just, are you going to have a good time on it with your colleagues,
Yeah.
Right, and that actually goes along to the point that Pete was making in the beginning, which is the idea that you need to be likable. Because if you're not a likable character or person, no one's going to ever want to play with you, and you could be the greatest musician on the planet, and if you have a bad attitude, or you don't show up on time, or you
just kind of weird people out,
or you weird people out, which we've seen.
I think we're thinking of the exact same person right now.
We've seen many a time. So that plays a much bigger factor, I think,
By the way,
than
Josh,
anybody
I brought
lets
you
on.
some.
No, but it's just very interesting because I've done a lot of work at Juilliard and Manhattan School.
You have?
Yeah, like a lot of performances and some teaching and some clinics. And so many of these students have such an attitude, and I just want to grab them and be like, unless you win the New York Philharmonic job, that's the only way that you can be a giant asshole and still work.
After the first year, after 366 days.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and ironically, the guy who just won the Phil is a really nice guy. I mean, like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right, Kyle.
I honestly find that when the old school is retiring and stuff and the new school is coming in, I find that the guys that are winning jobs now are like super nice, cool, not really as arrogant as like once before possibly. I think they're kind of relaxed and laid back.
You know why? I know exactly why.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the marketplace just doesn't allow for that anymore. There's not enough jobs for people to be awesome and not care about what lies in their wake behind them. There's no room for that, whereas maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago when there was a lot more performing work.
Right, maybe there was just more gigs.
Yeah, there was more gigs, and so you knew you were going to get work, and so screw that guy.
Yeah.
Also, I think, in terms of capability of playing, I feel like there's also a giant epidemic of people who percussionists, and really actually all musicians in general, that just don't have time. That just can't play time. And it's
I thought you meant it in a totally different way. I'm going to pursue the other half of that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No,
go
but
ahead.
I find there's this like epidemic. Maybe it's because of the access to everything that we as percussionists and musicians have. But when I go and give a clinic, I could tell in about 3 seconds what kind of player somebody is. I know all of us can.
You know enough.
And so much of the time, people are worrying about quality of sound above time. And that is like a big pet peeve of mine, because they'd rather pick out 15 different tambourines and 15 different timbres and, oh my God, am I playing with the shaft of the stick? Am I playing with the beat, with the butt end of the stick? Am I playing with the tip of the stick? Like, I don't give a shit what you are playing or how it sounds, because if there's no time, if it's not in time, forget it. You have one job as percussionists, mainly. The one job as a percussionist
You
is
had
time.
one job.
And you failed because you're concerned about the quality of sound. And I do think quality of sound is important, but not nearly as important as the one job that you have as a percussionist.
Right.
Well said.
The cool thing is, once you get the time taken care of, then if you have the other stuff, the sound quality and all that, then it's great. Someone that I met more recently, but you're good friends with, Mike Englander.
Yes.
I went and watched him play his book at Aladdin a couple weeks ago. One of the things I was dying to talk to him about was everything was phrased. Everything he played had musical direction, but that would not have crossed my lips had he not had perfect time first.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So, in other words, just get your priorities in order.
Right.
But the thing I thought you were talking about, Josh, is that they don't have time, in that people have so many things going on in their life that they don't have time to be nice.
Oh, interesting.
One thing that had to do with that marimba rental that you hooked me up with last week, Andy, do you know who the other team was that rented the other marimba to them, to that ensemble that was playing at St. Peter's?
No, who?
Well, I'm not going to say, but it was kind of funny, and this is a different aspect of capability, which I definitely want to be talking about in the future with you guys, is, for example, there was a 2 marimba rental for this chamber group, and I provided my low E.
Were they happy with it?
Yeah, totally. And there was great guys. and this pretty well-known organization. Everybody here has heard of them.
You should say it now and then edit it later.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they did rentals.
And so they had a couple of their, I guess, interns. I literally was packed up and out of there twice as fast as them after the gig. And I actually, as part of it, Andy, I actually helped them.
And you generally take your time when you're packing.
Well, relatively. I mean, I didn't want to have to pay. It's Midtown parking rates, so I didn't want to have to pay extra there. But that sort of capability. That I remember the first time I had to really pack up for a gig and make sure everything was getting ready to do the haul, so to speak. And it's like that sort of thing. Man, does school not prepare you for that?
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
And I don't know if it could. I'm not expecting, school can't do everything. It's unfortunate that it's called school, and so you expect all your learning to take place.
Right, very true.
But it was just an interesting thing, and the guys were super cool, and they actually, one of them commented to me as I was blurring past him and helping him hold the door and stuff like that. He's like, wow, man, you're a real pro. Oh, thank you. See you later. And I took off. But it was just this really interesting aspect of business, especially as percussion. I mean, we're not always going to talk about percussion, but I don't know how much of our conversation will filter in that aspect of it. But it was just a really interesting side aspect of capability that people don't think of. But it can affect your ability to make music. If you can't get there on time, or if you're so frazzled and tired from not knowing how to pack stuff up and move efficiently, it's going to factor into how you play.
True.
And on that note, bros, I've just pressed the elevator. I got to run.
All right. From all of us here at Hit, Haul, and Hang, it's been a wonderful day.
All right. Later.
Later.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you had a good time. We are on YouTube, Facebook, and by the time you hear this, we'll probably be on iTunes. Just look for Hit, Haul, H-A-U-L, and Hang. Learn more about Josh at joshuamarksamuels.com. Andy wants you to check out Song of Solomon, the musical, and Goodbye New York, the musical, on Facebook, as well as his publishing company, Bakovich Music Publications, at bakovich.com, which also has a really great book called A Percussionist's Handbook by yours truly, Peter Sala. Go to exit9percussion.com for information on the group, and check out A Percussionist's Handbook Facebook page. Looking forward to the next hang.
Speaking of Mike Englander, he just emailed me. That's funny.
You could edit that out.
Yeah, I will.